What is up, everybody? So this will be my first video that I upload to my YouTube channel. I want to preface this video by saying that even though I am a diehard sports fan, as you can see by some of the stuff on my wall behind me, a couple of Royals pennants, one from when we won the American League pennant, and one from when we won the World Series in 2015, and so on and so forth. Even though I am a pretty big sports fan, I'm going to try to every now and then kind of mix things up. Talk about things like music and entertainment, movies, TV shows, and talk about the Bible a little bit. I am a Christian, so I'm going to try to work that into my YouTube channel as well. Things that I'm experiencing, like if I go on vacation, for example, posting highlight videos from family vacations. That'll be something that I'll definitely try to work in as well. And also I'm going on a mission trip this summer, so I'm going to try to package together a highlight video from my trip to Vancouver this summer, and kind of give you all a feel for what it's like on an international mission trip. And this will be my first international mission trip, so I'm very excited about that. So I'm going to try to work in some things, and even with sports, it's not just going to be like one particular sport each time. Like if things happen in football, basketball, and baseball, so on and so forth, I'm going to try to work in some different things. So like for example, the NBA playoffs are going on right now. Baseball season is up and running, and football season's leading into the NFL draft here coming up later on this month. So I'm gonna work in some stuff with that. And WWE is always going on. There's no off season, so there's definitely gonna be some things mixed in, kind of every now and then. So I want to start this video with a couple of NFL notable moves made toward the end of last week and over the weekend, with Dez Bryant getting released by the Dallas Cowboys. I didn't exactly see it coming in the way that it did, with the fact that Dez Bryant never was offered a pay cut. I figured it'd be, bring him in, see if he'll take a pay cut. He probably says no, and then he gets cut. I would have expected that, but Dez recently said in an interview with NFL Network that he was never offered a pay cut. So that part kind of stood out to me, and just the fact that he got released. I figured there'd be some teams out there willing to make a trade for him, but we'll see where that goes. There's a team like the Green Bay Packers, for example, that could use a wide receiver with the recent release of Jordy Nelson. So maybe he ends up there, or maybe he ends up with a different team that needs a wide receiver. Part of me wants, or not necessarily wants, but part of me believes that he will end up with the Patriots. But also there's that side of me where the Patriots probably wouldn't pay him the money that he would want anyway. So I'm kind of on both sides of the fence there, but I think I'm actually leaning towards he probably won't end up with the Patriots. Probably the Packers, or maybe even the Raiders. Who knows? We'll see how that goes. Even though the Raiders did just get Jordy Nelson, I wouldn't rule out Dez Bryant going to the Raiders, but we'll see how that goes. And then there's Jarvis Landry getting a contract extension over the weekend with the Cleveland Browns. Kind of wasn't expecting that either, because I figured he was going to ride out this one-year franchise tender and then hit the free agent market next year. So that part was rather interesting, but John Dorsey being the general manager of the Browns and kind of bringing in a new regime there, maybe the future looks bright for the Browns. We'll see. I don't think they'll be the laughing stock of the NFL this season, only unless they win like 3 games with the talent that they brought in there, and with, like I said, John Dorsey being the new general manager there. I think they'll definitely be at or around 500. Maybe at worst with 6 wins this year. I think that's a very distinct possibility. Um, or maybe even 7-9 or 8-8. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Um, I think they'll definitely be better this year for sure. Um, the NBA playoffs right now, home teams were undefeated yesterday. Um, that was rather interesting, especially with the Toronto Raptors and their previous history with game ones in the NBA playoffs. Um, Finally winning a game one over the Wizards yesterday. Um, I literally only caught like the last minute and a half of the game, but um, from what I saw on SportsCenter, it looked like a pretty intense game all the way down to the end. So at least that's good. Then the Pelicans were victorious in their matchup yesterday. Anthony Davis finally gets a playoff win in his career, so I'm definitely happy for him. You know, even though he played for Kentucky and I didn't necessarily like him when he played for Kentucky, just because I don't like Kentucky really. He's a great player. There's no doubt about that. Um, so yeah, and the Warriors just steamrolling the San Antonio Spurs. That was kind of expected. I mean, let's be real. Kawhi wasn't playing, and even without Steph Curry, the Warriors are so much better than the Spurs right now. So um, that was pretty interesting. So and the Philadelphia 76ers, or sorry, I guess that means home teams weren't undefeated yesterday, with the Pelicans beating the Trailblazers. Um, but the 76ers beating the Heat yesterday, that I think that's good for the NBA. That the Sixers are actually very competitive this year, the 3 seed in the East. Um, it's definitely a good change. Obviously for the Sixers, for the city of Philadelphia, but also for the NBA. You know, the fact that the Sixers tanked for so long and now they're actually pretty competitive after not making the playoffs the past several years to be the 3 seed in the East. That's quite a statement. So it'll be interesting to see how far they go in the playoffs, and if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, or if they make it to the second round. So um, it'll be interesting. I don't think they make the finals, but I'm not going to rule it out either. I think it's very possible that they can get that far, but that would mean that they're way ahead of schedule. So we'll see how they look when Joel Embiid comes back from his injuries. And if Markelle Fultz continues to improve, and if Ben Simmons continues to look impressive. So we'll see how that goes. I think it's very possible that the Eastern Conference Finals this year is Cleveland versus the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm not afraid to go on record as saying that. And actually, that's going to be my prediction. Eastern Conference Finals, Sixers versus Cavaliers. Because I think the Cavs, they'll just flip the switch and they'll become so much better in the playoffs than they have been in the regular season. Basically, like they have all the other years that they've been in the finals since LeBron came back. So, I think that's within the realm of possibility. So, in the West, the Rockets are probably going to steamroll the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think at best for Minnesota, it'll be one win in that series, but I think the series ends in 4 or 5 games. Even though the Timberwolves are very talented, they just don't match up to the Rockets right now. So I think it's going to be the Rockets versus the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. So that would be an interesting NBA version of the Final Four. Rockets, Warriors, Cavs, 76ers. I think that's going to bring a lot of entertainment value. So that'll be pretty cool. In baseball, the Royals don't look too good right now. So hopefully next time I mention the Royals in a YouTube video update, they'll be better. But right now, it's just a pretty big struggle. We are second in the major leagues in losses via blown leads with 6. And that's really disappointing because our bullpen used to be the best in the majors. And now it's a huge struggle for us. So our starting pitching has looked way better than it has in the past couple years. So that's good. But obviously our bullpen is a huge work in progress, and our offense, it's just inconsistent right now. So hopefully when the weather starts to get better and stays better, and a little more consistent, the Royals will get more consistent. But yeah, we'll see. The Braves are not looking too bad though. Much better than I think a lot of people would have predicted that they would be. So even though they blew a huge lead yesterday and gave up 9 runs in the 8th inning to blow their big lead yesterday, aside from that, they've looked pretty good. So hopefully the Braves and the Royals make the postseason this year, but I think the Braves are definitely more likely to make the postseason right now than the Royals are. So obviously still a lot of baseball left to be played, so we'll see where things end up. In the world of WWE, starting tomorrow night on Monday Night Raw, there's going to be a 2-day Superstar Shakeup event going on. So obviously tomorrow night on Raw and Tuesday night on SmackDown Live, there's going to be some different guys and girls going to the different brands between Raw and SmackDown, and then probably some NXT call-ups. I think more will happen this week, mostly on the SmackDown side, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I did do a little bit of internet research just to kind of get an idea of what's likely to happen versus just kind of what's possible for the Superstar Shakeup. There's a sports entertainment website that tends to post a lot of WWE rumors, Sportskeeda. I read a few of their articles in relation to the Superstar Shakeup. So here are some of the things that they said. Who they believe should move over to SmackDown Live. The 5 names that they listed: Jeff Hardy, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Finn Balor, and The Miz. Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose, I definitely I disagree with that. Dean Ambrose isn't even cleared for in-ring competition right now, so I don't think it would make sense for him to move over to SmackDown Live. It's just at least until he comes back from injury, which is supposed to happen around SummerSlam, but we'll see there. Roman Reigns, I think he'll end up staying on Monday Night Raw, because I still think it's going to happen that they'll put the title on him at the Greatest Royal Rumble event in Saudi Arabia later this month. I mean, obviously it's also possible that Brock Lesnar could retain. But I think it'd be a really bad move for WWE if they have Brock retain, because they would that would make a lot of fans angry. Especially with the fact that he's only defended the title maybe 6 times in over a year that he's had the championship. So I think it's time to put it on a full-time superstar. And I think Roman's going to get the job done at the Greatest Royal Rumble event in Saudi Arabia 2 weeks from this past Friday. So we'll see, obviously, how that goes. Finn Balor and The Miz, I definitely think should go to SmackDown Live for different reasons. For Finn Balor, he's still technically owed a rematch for the Universal Championship, but it's just become apparent over the past several months that he's just never going to get that opportunity. So I think a change of scenery would be good for him. And I'll get into some more details about why I think he should go over there in addition to that. The Miz should definitely go back to SmackDown Live in the shakeup tomorrow night. This week, I guess. And because when Daniel Bryan was the general manager of SmackDown Live, like when he first got there, he had issues with The Miz, and The Miz had issues with Daniel Bryan. But they couldn't really have a payoff because Daniel Bryan was still not cleared for in-ring competition. So I think they can finally have that feud in the ring. I think that'd be a great move for WWE to put Miz on SmackDown Live. Jeff Hardy, I'm kind of on the fence. I guess it's possible They could be shipped over to SmackDown Live, but I think what they've got going on with Jeff Hardy, with his brother Matt and Bray Wyatt, it's possible that they could still be a tag team going forward, or it's possible that Bray Wyatt can stab Matt in the back. So, I think for that storyline, I'm just gonna say I think it's best that Jeff Hardy stays on Monday Night Raw for now, and maybe he moves over to SmackDown Live in the post SummerSlam Superstar Shakeup, basically. So, and then there were some people that they felt should not switch brands, and I actually agree with all of them. AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, Ronda Rousey, Shane McMahon, and Charlotte Flair. I mean, Ronda Rousey, she just got to Monday Night Raw. Why change? So, that's how I feel about that. And Shane, why would he benefit from switching brands? Unless you're going to ship him over to Raw as the commissioner and send Stephanie McMahon over to SmackDown Live. But I don't really think that's going to change anything, because Stephanie is going to have her favorites, and, I just think it's best that Shane and Stephanie stay on their respective brands. AJ and Seth, yeah, I'm definitely in with them staying with their respective brands. And Charlotte, same thing. I think staying on SmackDown for at least a little while longer is going to be really good for her career right now, considering she's still technically owed a rematch for the SmackDown Women's Championship since Carmella cashed in last week. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, some superstars that they feel would get pushed after changing brands. The 5 names that they listed are Bayley, Elias, Finn Balor, The Club, which is Gallows and Anderson, and Daniel Bryan. With Daniel Bryan, I definitely disagree with that. To have that payoff in a feud with The Miz on SmackDown Live would be great for ratings. And just to, finally have that payoff would be huge. And with Elias, I'm not really sure. I think he'll never really reach above the mid-card push. But yeah, I guess he could benefit from switching brands, but he just got destroyed by Bobby Lashley, so he's going to have some sort of feud with Bobby Lashley. And I don't think he's going to switch brands until at least that feud is over, unless they just decide not to have a feud between Bobby Lashley and Elias. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, they mentioned Finn Balor. I definitely agree with that. The Club, I definitely agree with that. And Bayley. Yeah, Bayley, she's basically been buried on Raw the past several months, ever since she lost the title to Alexa Bliss at Payback last year. So yeah, I definitely think it's time for her to switch over to SmackDown, and we'll see where that goes. Some superstars that they feel would be buried after changing brands: Shelton Benjamin and Chad Gable. Yeah, I guess based on the tag team division on Raw, that would make sense, but I feel like they would get their chance down the line. Jinder Mahal, who I feel should be buried anyway. Dolph Ziggler, that makes sense because he's, kind of in that stage of his career right now where he's putting people over. Seth Rollins, it just wouldn't be a great move for him to switch brands anyway. So, I definitely agree with, or not necessarily agree, but I definitely feel switching brands would not be good for him. And the fifth name they mentioned is Bobby Roode. I don't necessarily think he would get buried per se, but I feel like he wouldn't get the push that he deserves over there. So yeah, I think he'll. I think even if he goes to Monday Night Raw, he's going to get a shot at the Intercontinental title down the line, at the very least. So that'll be interesting. Some feuds that they predict will happen as a result of the Superstar Shakeup. Rusev versus Elias. I think that could be fairly interesting. Bobby Lashley versus Randy Orton. That goes back to their days in OVW, Ohio Valley Wrestling, when it was kind of a minor league promotion for WWE, basically. So that could be interesting. Charlotte versus Ronda Rousey. Yeah, they're gonna build that up as likely the main event of WrestleMania 35, at MetLife Stadium next year. So, uh, I think eventually they'll be on the same brand, just not right now. AJ Styles versus Finn Balor. I Sure, it's a feud that's possible, but and I'll get into this a little bit later. I feel like that's not going to happen immediately, but maybe down the line. And then I kind of mentioned it earlier, Daniel Bryan versus The Miz. That could be a very interesting feud now that Daniel Bryan is cleared for in-ring competition. And they have a whole slew of predictions, but I'm just going to kind of save that because that's going to take up a lot of time. So, based on those different things versus based on my internet research, based on just kind of my own intuition, or not necessarily intuition, but like a gut feeling, basically, here are what I think is going to happen. And I'll be marking these down to see how many of them I get right and how many I get wrong. So, we'll see over the next couple days. The superstars that I predict are going to go to Monday Night Raw, in no particular order: Bobby Roode, Rusev and Aiden English, The New Day, Shelton Benjamin and Chad Gable, Randy Orton, Becky Lynch, Natalya, Naomi, and Dolph Ziggler. Just like in terms of New Day and Benjamin and Gable, they got to shake up the tag team division on SmackDown, and one of the real ways you do that is by shipping multiple teams from SmackDown over to Raw. So that'll be pretty interesting. And the women's division could definitely use some changes on Monday Night Raw. So you bring in some new faces in Becky Lynch, Natalya, and Naomi. And besides, I just kind of feel like the WWE is going to send Naomi over there anyway to get her away from the Usos, which, I mean, it just sounds like something WWE would do. So that kind of sums up everything for SmackDown. And I think it would be interesting to see Randy Orton feud with Bobby Lashley, whether it's in the early portion of the summer, before Lashley faces Brock Lesnar, or maybe it's after Bobby Lashley faces Brock Lesnar. So we'll have to see there. And yeah, I think if Bobby Roode gets shipped over to Raw, he'll eventually get an opportunity for the Intercontinental Championship, which I think that could be pretty interesting. Put him in a program that's centered around that title. That'd be pretty interesting. And so I don't expect any more NXT call-ups for Monday Night Raw, except for maybe Sanity. But I feel like they've got the Authors of Pain, so I kind of feel like if anything, they might end up on SmackDown, but we'll see. The superstars that I predict will either go to SmackDown based on being shipped over from Raw or getting called up from NXT. Also, in no particular order, Gallows and Anderson and Finn Balor. And here's why I believe that. Basically, this right here, Too Sweet. Imagine the pop that they're going to get if they put together Gallows and Anderson with Finn Balor and AJ Styles, basically having a small WWE version of the New Japan Pro Wrestling Bullet Club faction. That would be pretty popular, especially with AJ being the WWE champion right now. And let's say, you get Finn Balor in a United States Championship program and Gallows and Anderson going for the SmackDown tag team titles. That could be a very dominant faction down the line. And I kind of already touched on it earlier. The Miz, I feel like we'll go to SmackDown Live as a part of the shakeup. For the women's division, Um, I feel like you could bring in Absolution with Paige being the general manager. There's that obvious connection there. Um, she'll probably try to find a way to bring Sonya and um, Mandy over to SmackDown. And I think a couple of other women she'll bring over are Bayley and Sasha Banks, because their feud's still kind of going on right now. I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how that feud pays off um, in the long run. And you could have Absolution maybe have recruit a third person to go against the Riot Squad. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Especially with Liv Morgan being in hot water with WWE, probably, because she leaked out the NXT tapings from this past week. So she's probably in big trouble right now. So we'll see how that goes. Considering Big Cass did not make a return last week from his injury, like Jeff Hardy and Samoa Joe did from theirs, I think that was a pretty big clue that he'll end up on SmackDown Live, and I think that'll be a good move for him. You know, he's still in line for a really big push, which they're also saying about Baron Corbin. So, yeah, who knows? We'll see. And Drew McIntyre is an interesting one because he is recovering from an injury, and he just got cleared for in-ring competition, and he's still technically a member of the NXT roster. So he'll be a returning from injury NXT call-up to SmackDown Live, because I think that would just be like the ideal place for him right now. If you put him on Raw, he's going to get buried. But if you put him on SmackDown, he's still got a pretty good chance of getting a mid-card push, maybe for the United States Championship. So we'll see about that. Andrade Cien Almas, I think his loss to Aleister Black at NXT TakeOver was a bit of a signal that he's going to get called up to the main roster, especially with the fact that Johnny Gargano won his unsanctioned match with Tommaso Ciampa, being reinstated to the roster down there. So that's the route I think that SmackDown will go. So they'll bring up Andrade Cien Almas. And I had Elias on this list, but now that I think about it, I'm going to take him off that list. I think he'll stay on Raw, to continue whatever he's going to have going on with Bobby Lashley. So, in terms of that, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this edition of Sports and Everything Else, which is the name of my YouTube channel. So yeah, kind of just not necessarily on a regular schedule or anything. Next edition, we'll see what comes up in terms of the world of sports and entertainment. And until next time, see you later, everybody.